We're going to talk about the reasons why God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And first of all, most of us know it. We were told in this story that the cries of Sodom went up to God, and it was so much that he decided he was going to destroy that city and the cities related to it. But what was it so bad that they did that God said there's no redemption for that? You know, and the story we pick up on first is the fact that men wanted to lay with men. Right? It says that. So that's what we focus on, is the homosexuality part. And that's a huge part of it, but there's more to it than that. And if you think in that story, these angels, these messengers, went into Sodom and they went to Lot's house to pull Lot out. Lot was considered righteous enough to save. Right? God didn't want him in the city because it was going to be destroyed. So the men of the city saw two strange men come into the city, and they wanted to know them. They wanted to have sex with them. It was going to be blunt. And if you notice in this story, Lot goes out and says, don't do it. Here's my daughters. Neither one of these two, the ones that weren't married, they haven't known a man yet. Have them. And the first thing that those men did was get mad because they got offered women. It wasn't because they just wanted to do a certain act, but they wanted to do a certain act with men. They didn't care about the women. They got angry when he offered up his daughters. I personally think that Lot knew they were going to reject that. That's why he offered them up. Right? Now, if you ever heard the term sodomy, it comes from Sodom. I'm not going to go into what that is. Just letting you know. Anyway, the first sin that we all know of, a reason why God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, was this perverted sexuality. Homosexuality or pansexuality. Have you heard of that? Pansexuality? This is what's going on in America today. You can't hardly, they're getting ready to have a parade downtown about this. You're pushing away Christianity and pushing away God in prayer in school and prayer outside, but we're flying rainbow flags everywhere.
In San Francisco, LGBT history is all around, but state school officials today adopting new guidelines, making the history part of classroom lessons in all California schools. At Our Family Coalition, a group representing LGBT families, Jennifer Grant says she's excited her 15-year-old twins will learn about the movement for gay marriage.
They were at my wedding to my wife, but they have no understanding of who fought for that and how we got to that point.
The law to include LGBT history passed 4 years ago, but budget cuts and opposition, like this petition against it, stalled the plan. Now California public school curriculum will include lessons in 2nd grade about diverse families. In 4th grade, students will learn about California's place in the gay rights movement. In 5th grade, 8th grade, and high school, students will learn about gender roles in the 18th and 19th centuries and examples of individuals who flouted them. In the classroom, students will learn about prominent LGBT historical figures throughout the world. Perhaps they'll learn about someone like Oscar Wilde, the Irish writer.
We may not agree with all the history or the experiences. We may embrace some of it, but I really want my children, and I would hope all parents would want their children, to learn about everything that's out there and then make up their own minds.
The latest victory in the gay rights movement now in the classroom. In San Francisco, I'm Jessica Flores, KPIX 5.
Our kids are being indoctrinated with this. Did you see that? 2nd grade, 4th grade, 8th grade. You know, they can't get away from it. And they're being taught, if you don't agree with this, then you're full of hate. I found this book. It's a children's book. Does everybody remember the Hey Diddle Diddle? Remember that? What is it? The cow jumped over the moon. Right. Well, you probably learned that as a little girl, didn't you? Okay. This is the modern version of it. Sometimes the spoon runs away with another spoon. Right? And I got it just like this is what's being passed around as coloring books to little bitty kids. Okay? These are some of the pages that's inside. I hope it's another princess. I hope it's another princess. Remember the story of the girl kisses the frog, gets the prince? Not every little boy wants to be Superman. The new pronoun they invented suited just everyone fine. Z. You're not supposed to call anyone he or she anymore. You got to say Z. And this generation that's coming up now is called Generation Z. The millennials, Generation X, the greatest generation. Remember all that labeling? This generation is called that. Here's one more. Spreads drag queens teaching kids to becomes a phenomenon. Now, I don't know if you can see this. These kids right here, if you can read that, they're as young as 2 years old. I want to point out some of these links. This is on a website that are associated with this. Satanists boast we quashed pro-life law. Exorcists issue urgent call for spiritual reinforcements. Now people are going gaga over the temple to Mithras. Mithras is Tammuz. Devil worship comes to the National Mall in D.C. Satanists up against basic scientific facts in an abortion law case. This stuff is just right there. And your kids can access all of this stuff on their phones. Now I have a question. I don't want to spend too much time on this because we all know this. But does this stuff make you upset? Does it make you feel gross, nasty, sick to your stomach? The good thing is that is the Holy Spirit telling you that this is wrong. You ever wonder if you have the Holy Spirit and this turns your stomach? You do. That's the Holy Spirit going, I don't like that. Right? Now, what would you do if you walked in and your grandchild or child is being read a book by that? I don't even know what that is. Yeah. This was in Michelle Obama's library. Okay.
Some days I would feel extremely masculine, and some days I would feel like extremely feminine, and that's when I started to notice that something was up.
You know, I was proud of her, but I was also worried. As a parent, you worry because you worry that they're going to get their feelings hurt at school, that people are going to, you know, be very hurtful, and we did have some pretty bad things happen to her. Sometimes on like the New York subway system, I'll be like waiting for a train, and someone will like realize that I'm in a dress and like tell me I should throw myself on the tracks. Happens like once every other month or so-ish.
You know, I still get stares. People still will cross the street so they don't have to walk next to me. It doesn't feel good.
Gender fluid people are not confused. They know exactly who they are. They want to be seen and perceived in a way that may challenge other people's perception. And that's very courageous.
I identify as a gender, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs.
I identify as gender fluid, and my pronouns are he or she.
There is more than just boys, girls, men, women. There can be people who live in the spaces between them.
That moment when I found out that, you know, there was more than two genders, I was like, everything just kind of fell into place and made sense.
That's enough. And then this was on USA Today. Celebrities and others explain what it means to be pansexual. That means you like everything. You don't just like boys or boys who think they're girls, or girls who think they're boys, or boys who think they're trees. It's whatever. And one of the promoters of this is Miley Cyrus. Right? She identifies as that. Okay? Now, one of the things that caught me about this was that guy that said, these people aren't confused. They know exactly who they are. They're a man one day, they're a woman one day, they're a dog one day. They know exactly who they are. That is the most backwards statement anyone can make. A person that doesn't know they're a man today, a man tomorrow, and a man the next day are confused. And they're sitting there promoting the fact that to our kids that there are more than one gender. Genesis says God made male and female. Man and woman, male and female, created he them, and that's it. There is none of this crap. This is an invention of the enemy. Excuse me for saying that, but it's true. So these people, like he said, there's the spaces in between. Did you hear that? Today I feel like this. Tomorrow I feel like this. In Revelation, I know your works, that you neither be hot or cold. I wish you were hot or cold, one or the other. So then you are lukewarm, neither hot or cold. I will spit you out of my mouth. Make a decision. Either you're going to be for me or against me. Don't be this wishy-washy, because I won't deal with you. God sent Christ to die for these people too. Right? We have to see them through the same eyes that Christ did on the cross. That's hard to do. He loved them enough that he shed the same blood for us as he did them. Right? But we don't have to put up with it. And these people need to make a choice. I'm either this or that, and then God will deal with it. But until you realize who you are, he can't deal with you. Because you're not going to be the same tomorrow. That one person said there's multiple sides of me. Well, one of those sides might come down and give himself to the Lord, and then the other side might show up tomorrow. That's legion. That's demonic possession. Anyway, so if that stuff upsets you, then you need to thank the Holy Spirit in you for recognizing it. Now, I'm going to talk a minute about the book of Jasher. Because I got a couple of books back here. I want to show you this as well. I was in the gas station the other day, and I picked this up. USA Today. Sex education. The age-old struggle of morality versus reality. On the front page. What is moral is not real. That's what they're saying. The reality is not moral, and morality is not reality. This was this week. You know? It's all over the place. And you're going to see why I'm bringing this up in a minute. The book of Jasher is not in the Bible. It's not an authorized, inspired book. Okay? Has anybody ever... I have it right here. This is the book of Jasher. Has anybody ever used one of these? Strong's Concordance. This is a helpful tool. But this book is not inspired either. This book is used to help you read the Bible. It's a reference book to help you understand some of the stuff. Oops. We're having all kind of fun today. This book is the same thing. It's a reference book. It's a history book. And it is mentioned in the Bible. I'm going to show you. The Bible gives us permission to read from this book. The Bible doesn't mention Strong's. This is from the book of Joshua 10:13. And the sun stood still and the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves upon the enemies. Is this not written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of the heavens and hastened not to go down the whole day. We've all heard this story about the sun standing still. But where's that story at? It tells you. It's in here. So the writer of Joshua said, I'm not going to rewrite that story. You know it. If you want to learn it, you'll read it in here. And it also tells you that when Joshua was written, they were already reading this. This is over. Okay? 2 Samuel, it talks about it well too. David called one of the young men and said, Go near and fall upon him. And he smote him that had died. And David said unto him, The blood be upon thy head, for thy mouth has testified against thee, saying, I have slain the Lord's anointed. And David lamented with his lamentations over Saul and over Jonathan his son. Also he bade them to teach the children of Judah to use the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. So that second story in the parentheses there, somebody inserted it because they're like, I want you to go check that story out in here. Okay? My point is the Bible authorizes me to use this because I'm going to use this to describe more of Sodom. There's more of Sodom in here. 2 Timothy mentions it too, about Jannes and Jambres are the wizards, the magicians that threw their sticks on the floor and they turned into snakes. This is in Timothy. This is New Testament. And Paul's saying, hey, you remember Jannes and Jambres? They're not mentioned in the Bible anywhere. They're mentioned in Jasher. So anyway, I'm going to go through this. Jasher chapter 18. We're going to go through this because it's going to tell you more about Sodom and Gomorrah. And we're going to add it to what we already know from the Bible. In those days, all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah and of the whole 5 cities were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord, and they provoked the Lord with their abominations. And they strengthened and aging abominably and scornfully before the Lord, and their wickedness and crimes were in those days great before the Lord. And they had in their land a very extensive valley, about a half day's walk. And in it there were fountains of water and a great deal of herbage surrounding the water. All of the people of Sodom and Gomorrah went there 4 times in the year with their wives and their children, all belonging to them, and they rejoiced with their timbrels and dances. 4 times a year, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah would go out to this big field full of herbs. I'm just saying. Right? 4 times a year is probably on the equinoxes and the solstices. That's usually what they did. They celebrated. Okay, we got more of this. But you can already see. And in the time of rejoicing, they would all rise and lay hold of their neighbors' wives, and some their virgin daughters of their neighbors, and they enjoyed them. And each man saw his wife and daughter in the hands of his neighbor and did not say a word. And they did so from morning to night. And they afterward returned home, each man to his house, each woman to her tent. So they did this 4 times a year. So during this festival of whatever in the field of herbs, they're taking each other's wives and daughters and virgins and kids and doing what they want with them. And the key to this right here, each man saw his wife and daughter in the hands of his neighbor and did not say a word. Sin number 2. The church is guilty of this. Silence against sin. The church does not say anything. They become passive against this stuff. Right? We see this stuff going on and we don't say a word. That's sin number 2. You see the corruption going on and you're silent. Okay? Now you got to think, the homosexuality part was going on in every ancient city. God didn't destroy all of them. So there was a list of stuff in this one that he decided, I'm done with that. The second one is that. People not willing to stand up against what is wrong. And the church is guilty of this one. It started in the 60s when they decided to take prayer out of schools, and the church was silent. Let's keep going. Also, when a stranger came into the cities and brought goods which he had purchased with a view to dispose of, the people of these cities would assemble, men, women, and children, young and old, and go to the man and take his goods by force, giving a little to each man until there was an end to all the goods of the owner which he had brought. And if the owner of the goods quarreled with them, saying, what is work that you have done to me? They would approach him one by one, and each would show him the little that they took and taunt him, saying, I only took a little bit of what you had. And when he heard this from them all, he would raise up and go away in sorrow and bitterness of soul, and they would all rise and go after him and drive him out of the city with great noise and tumult. So a stranger would come into the city with something of value. And the people of the city would take everything he has and divide it amongst themselves. Kind of distribution of wealth. Right? And then when that person complains, each person will go, I only got a little bit. I only took a tax. I only have this little morsel. What are you complaining about? You came in here with all this stuff and I only have this. So the next sin is unfair treatment of people. This redistribution of wealth. Have you heard that before? It seems like that came up quite a bit.
I think when you spread the wealth around, it's good.
And that any healthcare funding plan that is just, equitable, civilized, and humane must redistribute wealth from the richer among us to the poorer and the less fortunate. Excellent healthcare is by definition redistributional.
Are you then calling for the redistribution of wealth in society?
Absolutely, without any hesitation. That's what the gospel is all about.
And then the third lesson and tip actually comes from two of my favorite political philosophers, Mao Zedong and Mother Teresa, not often coupled with each other. But the two people that I turn to most.
But the dream was not to put one black family in the White House. The dream was to make everything equal in everybody's house.
If what you mean by economic equality is floors for everybody and ceilings for everybody, well, floors, absolutely. Ceilings, probably. You have the consumption tax. Certainly a consumption ceiling, great.
Because we have been guided by a Republican administration who believes in this simplistic notion that people who have wealth are entitled to keep it, and they have an antipathy towards the means of redistributing wealth.
When it gets out of whack, as it did in the 20s and it has now, you need to do some redistribution. This is a form of redistribution. If you redistribute too much, then the system doesn't work because you take the incentive out of it.
No more broken treaties. No more broken treaties. Give them the wealth. Give them the wealth. Give them the dignity. Give them the respect.
The rich are not paying their fair share in any mission.
And guess what this liberal will be all about? This liberal will be all about socializing, will be about basically taking over and the government running all of your companies.
Sometimes people tell you exactly what they're going to do. Jasher 19. And by desire of the 4 judges of the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, they had beds erected in the streets. And if a man came into these places and laid a hold of him, brought him to one of the beds by force, and made him lie in the bed. And as he lay down, men would stand at the head and 3 at the feet, and measure him by the length of the bed. And if the man was less than the bed, these 6 men would stretch him at the end. And when he cried out to them, they would not answer. And if he was longer than the bed, they would draw together the 2 sides of the bed at each end until the man had reached the gates of death. And if he continued to cry out, they would answer him, saying, "Thus shall it be done to a man that comes into our land." Basically what this is saying is the people of Sodom, they had issues with immigrants. So the first thing is immigrants coming in, and they take his wealth. Now, these immigrants are going to come in because they're not people of the city. And then they take them to these beds that are placed all around the city. And if they don't conform to what they want, they try to make them conform by stretching them or compressing them to fit. And if they don't fit, they die. We have an issue here in America with immigration right now. And it's not just straight up immigration. They won't let Christians in. But the ones that do come in, they have to fit. They have to fit a certain mold. They have to be a certain way. You have to vote a certain way. You have to live in a certain city. Why do you think they're pushing sanctuary cities? They're protecting people that fit. And it's the ones that cause chaos. Right? San Francisco, the city we just saw pushing that, is a sanctuary city. Have you paid attention to the news? This stuff makes no sense at all why they would let somebody come into the city, kill somebody, arrest them, and then let them go. And arrest them again and let them go. And not tell the federal government, we don't have anybody. You can't have him even though he's here illegally because he fits. He fit the bed. We want him. So, next sin. The uniformity of citizens and the conformity of immigrants. Starting to see a pattern here. Injustice in Sodom. I'm going to go through some of these stories. These are in Jasher, but I'm just going to go through the stories real quick. I'm not going to read them. There's a story in there called Hadad and the Traveler. The man that came into the city, he was carrying his animal, and he had an expensive coat on. And he goes into the city, and he meets a guy, and the guy says, "Why don't you come stay at my house? Take a load off, I'll feed you." So the guy does. When he gets to Hadad's house, he says, "Let me take your coat. I'll put it away and give you some food." So he does. Next day, the traveler gets up and says, "I need to be on my way." And the guy says, "No, why don't you stay and I'll feed you. I'll feed you another day. Rest." So he does. Second day, the guy gets up and goes, "I really need to be on my way. I need my coat." And Hadad says, "You didn't bring a coat. You dreamed that." And the traveler's like, "No, I brought a coat in here. Me and my animal, we came in. We had a coat with us. I want it back." "No, you dreamed it, but let me interpret your dream for you." And he told him a dream, and then he started to want to charge him for interpreting the dream of bringing the coat. So Hadad goes in. "We need to go talk to one of the judges of the city." And the judge says, "No, that's true. You must have dreamed it. This guy is known for his interpretation of dreams." Right? So this corrupt judge sided with the corrupt man, and this guy he ended up leaving the city with nothing. treatment of the poor. In Jasher 19, verses 7 through 10, it tells you that poor people, when they come into the city and they fit the molds, if they don't exactly seem like they want to conform, they give them a bunch of money, but they won't let them spend it. They give them silver and gold, and they tell everybody, don't let them buy, don't let them sell, and then they end up starving to death. And then when they starve to death, they die, and the people go out and steal their money back. So this is a form of government welfare that they give people to keep them poor and then take it back from them. There is a Eleazar. He's in the Bible. Sarah sent Eleazar in this chapter here to go seek out Lot before the destruction was going to happen. Eleazar shows up and he meets a guy in the streets, and the guy is talking with him. The guy ends up picking up a rock and smashing Eleazar in the head. Cuts his head open, starts bleeding. Says the blood flowed ferociously. Says bleeding. And then the guy says, okay, now you owe me some money. And Eleazar says, why do I owe you money? Because you just hit me in the head with the rock. And the guy said, well, I let the bad blood out. You have bad blood in you, and I let it out. We have a lot of things going on in our hospitals like this now. You know, you have this wrong with you, and I just released it, and I'll give you some money. But still, he goes, I want to talk to a judge. They go to a judge, and the judge says, no, that's our custom. Give him the money. He released your bad blood. That's what we do here. This guy is known for that. He's popular. Right? The popular ones get all the attention and then make all the rules. Haven't we not seen that? They don't get held accountable by the courts. We haven't seen that in the news lately, have we? So, the funny thing is Eleazar is a servant of God, our God. And God gave him the wisdom. He said, okay, this is your rule, your custom. He picks up a rock and smashes the judge in the head with it. And says, now you pay what you owe me to him. And he walked away. So, you gotta love God's sense of humor. Now, Lot's oldest daughter's talked about in this chapter. Her name is Paltith. I think that's how you say it. She had compassion, and she would see some of these poor people walk around. They have all this money, but they can't eat. They can't buy. They can't sell. And she was sneaking somebody out some food and some water. She would find out where the person was sleeping, and she would take him some bread, water. And this went on for a minute, and people caught on because the guy wasn't dying. He wasn't getting sick. Right? He wasn't taking all the pharmaceuticals and getting sick. Somehow he's staying well. Something's wrong. And they found out it was her. They put spies out and found out it was her. And then they ended up setting her on fire. Killed her. And then there's another lady. It's called the Lady of Admah. Same thing. She was doing the same thing. She was helping the poor. The poor that actually needed it. Helping them eat, sneaking them out food, sneaking them out water. And what they did with her when they found out it was her was they covered her in honey, head to toe, and stuck a bunch of bees on her, and they stung her to death. So this right here is, I'm going to read this from Jasher 19 about that woman. And the young woman cried on the account of the bees, and no one took notice of her or pitied her. And her cries ascended to heaven. And the Lord was provoked at this and all the works of the cities of Sodom, for they had abundance of food and the tranquility amongst them, and still would not sustain the poor and the needy. And in those days their evil doings and sins became great before the Lord, and the Lord sent two of the angels that had come to Abraham's house to destroy Sodom and its cities. God does not like it when you treat people bad. So, last sin, injustice, corrupt courts. Okay? Now take a look at that list. Perverted sexuality, homosexuality, silence against sin, unfair treatment of people, redistribution of wealth, uniformity, conformity of citizens and immigrants, and corrupt courts. Is this America today? Unfortunately, it is. Except for the handful of people. Lot did not fit this. Lot kept judgment off. Eventually, someone had to go in and pull Lot away. And then judgment fell. We're looking for that today. We're looking for Christ to come back and say, okay, I need to take my people out of this mess and let my Father destroy it all. Right? If it wasn't for Lot being there, even though he might not have been perfect, he was righteous enough to stave off judgment. Right? You don't have to be perfect. You just have to try. Right? But you can see right here on the news any one of these pop up in any given story at any minute. Am I wrong? So, that's why we're in the days of Lot right now. If I talked about the days of Noah, we were talking about corrupted seed lines and corrupted blood and corrupted food and all this. That's why God flooded the world. This is why God burnt those cities. This is a picture of Sodom and Gomorrah today. They believe this is actually Gomorrah. Looks like mountains, but you can actually see shapes of city walls. This stuff was so hot that the walls were turned into gypsum ash. Right? This is right out there outside the Dead Sea. Here's a picture. World's oldest gay couple found in ancient ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah. 5,000 years old. I want to talk about another thing here. What's this of? Right. So I'm almost done. But we picture Lot's wife as being actually turned into a pillar of table salt. Right? But the Hebrew word there references the word called memorial. And when it says she turned back, the word turned back actually means to revere or to long for. Okay? Back in Genesis 19, if you remember that, it says the sun was risen upon the earth when Lot entered Zoar. And the Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone, fire from the Lord out of heaven. Got over through the cities and the inhabitants. Right? But his wife looked back from behind him and she became a pillar of salt. Now think about it. When Lot left, we always picture them running out of the gates of the city and while the brimstone's burning down behind them, right? It's not how it happened. They left in the morning. When they go outside the city, he's saying, the angel says, go to the mountains. Get out of the plains. They're going to be destroyed. And Lot says, I can't make it that far. Let me go to Zoar. Let me go there. And the angel said, okay, I won't destroy that city. You can go there. And it says the sun was risen the next day when he made it. It was a day's walk away. They walked a day before the rain fell with brimstone. So in order for Lot's wife to turn back and look, she's a day's walk away. She would have had to go back a little bit. And the word, if you look it up in Hebrew, it means to long for. She wanted to be there. She didn't want to leave. It's not that she just glanced back. Because Same chapter, Abraham got up and he stood and he looked at Sodom and Gomorrah and he saw the brimstone raining down. He didn't turn into salt, and he was watching it as it happened. So it wasn't the fact that you saw it, because Abraham watched it in 3D. He was right there, is what it says. He saw it and the smoke rose up like the smoke of a furnace. He was watching it happen. Lot's wife had a day's walk and she wanted to be back, so she turned back. Her heart was already there. And so she became this pillar of salt. We're going to get into that in a second. But here's a map. This is where they believe Sodom was. This is where some of the ruins are. Gomorrah was down here. Zoar is here. This is where they walked all the way down here. This is the Dead Sea right here. That's quite a long ways. Right? So here's the interesting thing. I'm going to play a video and one in a minute to kind of explains a little bit about the salt.
This is a natural mineral salt lick, the salt of which Moses spoke. Mineral salts from the bodies of the incinerated citizens of Sodom and Gomorrah continue to leach to the surface even after 4,000 years. After the atomic bombs were dropped that ended World War II in the Pacific, U.S. military inspectors at Hiroshima found piles of white powder near the blast site. Analysis proved the powder to be the mineral salts of the incinerated individuals who were vaporized in the fireball. All that was left was a pile of salt. That discovery and the salt licks of Sodom and Gomorrah may answer the question, what became of Lot's wife? The scriptures indicate she turned back to the doomed city and became not a literal pillar, but in the Hebrew, a memorial of salt. All that's left of her and the entire population is the mineral salts which the desert gazelle now eat.
Pretty wild, huh? You can still see that there. And that's the Dead Sea, the saltiest sea in the world. And it makes you wonder if not, what contributed to that being so salty. If you didn't hear what he said, the mineral salts of the people in Hiroshima, Nagasaki, they were vaporized by the heat of the atomic bombs, and the only thing left were clumps of salt from their body. The fire and brimstone raining down was so hot. Well, some of those people, they were just incinerated, and the only thing left was salt. Lot went up to Zoar and dwelt in a cave, and the two daughters that were with him feared to dwell in Zoar. They dwelt in a cave. You heard the story. The first one said to the young one, "Let's go have kids with our father." Right? Those offspring became the Moabites and the Ammonites. Right? Now keep in mind, one thing we miss is we're taught that Lot's daughters believed there was no other man in the world. But they had just left a city that was populated by people. Right? The angel let them go into Zoar. It was inhabited. But the key is, she says, "Our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come into us after the manner of the earth." Now what is that? That's the key. The manner of the earth are what they were used to. They had just left a city full of men, but what their home was Sodom. And they were thinking, there's not another man like our father was in Sodom around. We want to be back there. We want to continue that seed. Right? So their kids were born out of incest, which God frowns upon. This is in Deuteronomy. "The Ammonite and the Moabite shall not enter into congregation of the Lord. even to their 10th generation shall they not enter into the congregation of the Lord forever. Their offspring will never enter into congregation with God. Is that not what that says? But there is a way around that. Jesus said, verily I say unto you, unless you be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Amen. So as long as people remain an Ammonite, a Moabite, they will not enter into congregation with God. You have to be born into his family. So there is a way. They have to cease being what they were. Right? Got a couple more. And to you who are troubled, rest with us, when the Lord Jesus shall be revealed from heaven with his mighty angels in flaming fire, taking vengeance upon them that know not God and that obey not the gospel of Jesus Christ. Fire and brimstone will rain again on the people who don't know God or ones who don't follow the gospel. If you don't know what that is, now's a good time to start figuring it out. Right? I want to show one more video, and he's actually going to show you a piece of brimstone that's still there. You can go there today and still pull brimstone out of the wall. Still. Thousands of years later. And I want you to watch what he does, but listen closely to what he says.
These four locations have yielded the same ashen features and brimstone remains that we see here in the city of Gomorrah. The brimstone found here is unique to this part of the earth. Samples have been analyzed in laboratories in the U.S. and also in one of the most prestigious laboratories in the world, the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, Sweden, which awards the Nobel Prize in the field of science. Critical analysis showed this sulfur to be 95.72% pure sulfur with 3 other trace metals which could generate sufficient heat to melt even stainless steel. Several years ago, I spent an entire week camped out under the stars here in the city of Gomorrah. I'd heard that an archaeologist in the early 1800s had found this site and reported its location. In 1989, another archaeologist stumbled onto this site while working in the area. When I was introduced to the evidence, I was compelled to make a journey to this desert. Trudging my way through the ash by the light of the full moon, I crusted an ashen incline onto this moonlit plateau. Pale yellow balls of sulfur, exposed by a recent fall rain, were perched on the surrounding ash. I crushed one between my fingers and inhaled. This was the reason that I journeyed over 8,000 miles. As a skeptic, I had to see and smell this testimony for myself. I returned to Jerusalem a week later with a suitcase full of brimstone. Finding friends in the old city, I related my adventure to a growing audience who was eager to see if brimstone would still burn after 4,000 years in the desert. Touching a match to a small piece, it immediately became a black oozing mass with a purple flame. We began to choke and gag as the hot sulfur dioxide fumes seared our lungs. We evacuated the building and got the brimstone out of the building onto the street where it burned itself out. And that was the last time that I lit brimstone indoors. But I did learn a valuable lesson. Being unable to breathe in the presence of the poisonous gases emitted from the brimstone, the inhabitants of the cities would have been rendered unconscious. They would have died a relatively painless death before their bodies and diseases were cleansed in the fire. Even in judgment, our Creator is merciful.
Was that not an amazing? Even in judgment, God is merciful. Put him to sleep. But his no still meant no. And that's what's wrong with the church today and most families today as too much stuff is accepted. So my last slide is a warning. Behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give to every man according as his work shall be. You earn what you get in this. Coming to church and saying 10 Hail Marys and putting $20 in the poor box doesn't get you there. Right? Just being a good person doesn't get you there. Right? You have to follow the gospel. And the gospel is not trying to save souls. The gospel is not trying to win people over. The gospel is teaching people what Jesus taught. Showing people how to walk this thing out. Living the life. Sometimes you don't have to say a word and people are reading you like a book. You've heard you're the most Bible some people will ever read. You've heard that? That's true. You know, you don't know when people are watching you. And how you act at all times. People are waiting for something to pin some negativity on so they can go, see, they're just like me. But we are living in these days of all of this weird sexuality stuff going on, and everything goes, and you can be what you want. And I mean, there's a story of a woman who married a tree. You know? Did you read that? And not only is the fact that somebody wants to marry a tree, is how do you find a judge that goes, okay, I'll do it. That's that corrupt court thing. If you're not watching this whole thing on this Russia scandal, this is the most corrupt court system we've ever seen. And if you just watch CNN or MSNBC, you're going to get a different story. You're going to get this conformity thing. They're going to try to fit you into the bed. I either got to stretch you or I got to crush you. And either way, you're going to fit or you're going to die. Right? So those reasons, God said, I've had enough. So we want to be one of the ones that are called out when the brimstone hits the fan, right? So anyway, that's where we're at. It's not meant to scare you. It's meant for you to recognize we are here. You know, and once you accept the fact that this is where we are, now you can do something with it. Now God can do something with you. Right? We got to warn other people. Wake up, you know. Storm's coming. Amen?